Hi, I'm Pat Kiernan. This is Pat's Papers. Thanks for joining us this morning. We go through the newspaper headlines from across the country and thin them out to point you in the direction of what we find is most interesting and most relevant. Here's some of what we found today. The story that had the attention of the world yesterday for a few hours is on the front page of every newspaper I looked at this morning. The remarkable rescue of everybody aboard the US Airways plane that had to ditch in the Hudson River between New York and New Jersey. The New York Daily News with a 12-page special report. The front page headline is a tribute to pilot Chelsea Sullenberger as the hero of the Hudson. The headline on page 10 gives you a point of reference for that hero title. It says, how many other jets have landed safely in water? Exactly one. In fact, the newspaper's columnist Michael Daly is already calling on the city of New York to give Sully a traditional ticker tape parade. The New York Times reserves the word miracle for the second part of the headline on the front page, the main headline emphasizing up front that all 155 people on board were safe after the landing, or crash, or whatever we should call it. In two front-page stories, the Times emphasizes the good fortune that rescuers were so close at hand. The main story says what might have been a catastrophe was averted by a pilot's quick thinking and deft maneuvers and by the nearness of rescue boats. The headline of the New York Post is Miracle on the Hudson, not a crash landing, but a splash landing, the paper says. There are some dramatic color photos on pages 2 and 3 of the Post. Hundreds of photos of the rescue are online and in various papers, with thousands of people getting a view of what was happening from both sides of the river. Among the survivor stories in the Post, the guy who decided he could not wait to be rescued, it was clear that help was coming quickly, but he set off to swim to shore in 36-degree water. The story says he was disoriented, but somehow made it through his 15-minute swim. Miracle on the Hudson, the front page headline chosen by USA Today as well. The newspaper caters to a high number of business travelers every day, so coverage here addresses the risk of bird strikes and the other questions you'd probably have if you were sitting in an airport reading about this. USA Today's graphic artist did a nice job with the story showing a minute-by-minute breakdown of where the plane got into trouble, the peak altitude, 3,200 feet, and then the eventual reality that there was no place to go other than the river. The plane was headed for Charlotte, North Carolina. The Observer noting that the last crash involving a US Airways plane was at the Charlotte airport. 21 people were killed in January 2003. The story says on Thursday night at the airport, everyone was just grateful there was no mourning to do. And there's another story in the Charlotte paper looking at the threat to airplanes from a rising population of big birds. The danger increases because two-engine planes are increasing with the choice of airlines instead of three- or four-engine planes. And the story says the problems are often magnified because birds are drawn to open spaces at airports. Other news now, what might have otherwise been the main front page story, President Bush's farewell address got squeezed below the fold on the front page of the Washington Post. The story says he mixed his trademark confidence with a hint of contrition, noting that he experienced setbacks but emphasized that he was always looking out for America's best interests. President-elect Barack Obama spent more than an hour yesterday with the editorial board of the Post. There is coverage in two stories, one on how Obama is likely to reform entitlement programs, the other on how Obama was given virtually unfettered authority by the Senate yesterday to use the remaining $350 billion of the Treasury's financial rescue money. The other news from the financial sector is that Bank of America got its second bailout deal, covered in the Wall Street Journal this morning. The main problem is that the bank got into more than it bargained for when it took over Merrill Lynch in the fall. Those previously undiscovered losses sent Bank of America's stock price to 1991 levels. Business is good, on the other hand, in Tampa. For strippers, the Tampa Tribune bears all about dancers from throughout the country trying to sign on with the Bay Area's 43 strip clubs before Super Bowl fans arrive for the February 1st game. The story says the 7 days before the big game are among the most lucrative for strip clubs. Remember when Ralphie's friend took the triple dog dare in the movie A Christmas Story? He got his tongue stuck to a frozen metal pole. That's almost exactly how the story played out in the hometown of the movie's writer. An AP story in the Chicago Tribune says a 10-year-old boy got his tongue stuck to a metal light pole after a friend dared him Wednesday night. The temperature was hovering around 10 degrees. By the time medical help made it there, the unidentified boy was able to yank his tongue off the frozen pole. Editors of the South Bend Tribune note the obvious resemblance to Santa Claus of the man on the paper's front page. He's clearing snow in frigid weather, although a front page story notes some businesses don't mind the cold. Supermarkets, for one, typically see higher sales because people stock up so they can stay inside and cook at home. In Boston, the city's enforcement officers have some new technology to help them find people who don't shovel their sidewalks when required by law. The officers carry a handheld device that records the citation and photographs all in one place.
The city used to use Polaroid pictures as evidence when someone challenged a ticket, but officials think these high-resolution images will be a lot harder to appeal. It's another day with a depressing headline for the newspaper business. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune has to announce its own Chapter 11 filing on its front page. The paper was purchased a couple of years ago by a private equity group and says it's now stuck between high debt and the downturn in advertising. The Star-Tribune continues to publish. We'll finish with the LA Times. Some ideas here for people feeling left out because they're not traveling to Washington next week for the inauguration. The story looks at some of the local California events tied into the celebration, including an electric car parade.
And that's a look at just some of what's in the newspapers this morning. We try to pick the highlights for you each day, but if you think there's a particular story we should have included, send us a comment. You can do that at patspapers.com, and there you will find links to the individual newspaper websites where you can read these stories in their entirety.